The waves crashed violently against the jagged rocks as the night sky rumbled. Lightning illuminated the dark sea, revealing two silhouettes standing at the edge of a steep cliff. Between them, a frail old man in a wheelchair trembled, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he clutched the metal arms of the chair. "Please, Michael. Cynthia, don't do this to your own father," the old man's voice broke through the roaring wind. His face, wrinkled and pale, glistened with tears that mixed with the rain. Michael, a tall, muscular man in his late 30s wearing a soaked white shirt clinging to his body, clenched his fists. "You've done enough damage, old man. You built this empire and left us with nothing but crumbs. You've always loved your company more than your own children." Cynthia, his younger sister, stood beside him, her face half lit by the flickering storm light. She was in her early 30s, wearing a red trench coat, her makeup smudged by the rain. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the love she once had for her father. "Daddy," she whispered bitterly, "we begged you to hand over the company. You refused. You'd rather let strangers manage your billions than trust your own blood." The old man, Chief Robert Adesina, a respected business magnate whose conglomerate stretched across West Africa, looked from one child to the other. His voice trembled as he spoke. "The company was never meant to be a weapon of greed. I built it with sweat and honesty. But you too, your hearts are darkened by money." Michael stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "Enough of your speeches. You've controlled us all our lives. Tonight that ends." Cynthia hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling as she pushed the wheelchair closer to the cliff's edge. The waves below were merciless, roaring like angry spirits waiting to claim their victim. "Cynthia, my daughter," Chief Robert gasped, "look at me. Look into my eyes and tell me, how did you become like this?" Her lip quivered, but she turned away. "Goodbye, father." Michael grabbed the wheelchair handles, his eyes glinting with anger and desperation. "This is for everything you denied us." Before Chief Robert could utter another word, Michael shoved the chair forward. "No." The scream echoed as the wheelchair tumbled down the cliff, crashing against the rocks before disappearing into the dark, churning ocean. The siblings stood frozen for a moment, breathing heavily as the thunder rumbled above. The rain soaked their clothes, but their hearts burned with greed and guilt. "It's done," Michael muttered. "No body, no evidence." Cynthia's face turned pale. "Are you sure he's gone?" Michael's voice hardened. "Dead men don't come back from the ocean." But as they turned to leave, lightning flashed again, and for a split second, Cynthia thought she saw a shadow moving near the base of the cliff. A hand. Or was it her imagination? She gasped. "Did you see that?" Michael scoffed. "You're losing it. Let's go. We have a funeral to fake and an empire to take over." 3 weeks later, Lagos Island buzzed with the news of Chief Robert Adesina's death. Newspapers called it a tragic boating accident. The nation mourned a great philanthropist, and his 2 grieving children stood at the center of attention, dressed in black, accepting condolences from powerful politicians and business associates. Michael's speech at the memorial was full of lies, praising the same father he had sent to his death. "My father was a man of honor," he said, holding back fake tears. "We'll uphold his legacy and continue his work with pride." Afterward, they took control of Adesina Group. Michael became CEO and Cynthia managed the foundation. The money began flowing in, luxury cars, mansions, foreign accounts. But peace didn't follow. Because sometimes the dead don't stay buried. One night, as Cynthia sat alone in her Lekki mansion, sipping wine and scrolling through financial reports, she heard a knock. It was faint, almost polite. She frowned. It was past midnight. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. No answer. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The knock came again, this time louder. Cynthia's heart pounded. She slowly opened the door. No one was there. But as lightning flashed, she noticed muddy footprints leading away from her doorstep. Bare footprints. Large ones. She froze. "Michael?" she whispered into her phone. "Someone's been here." Michael, who was at a nightclub in Victoria Island, laughed. "Relax, Cynthia. You're paranoid. Maybe it's your guilt haunting you." Cynthia's voice quivered. "No, Michael. I swear I saw something. And the footprints, they looked like his." Michael's laughter died. "Whose?" She hesitated. "Father's." 2 days later, Michael's driver found his boss sitting in his car outside the company gate at 5 a.m., pale, sweating, and shaking uncontrollably. When asked what happened, Michael whispered, "I saw him. He was standing by the ocean last night, watching me." The driver frowned. "Who, sir?" Michael looked up, eyes wide with fear. My father. The driver froze. But, Chief Robert is dead, sir. Michael didn't respond. He just stared out the window as the first light of dawn broke over Lagos Lagoon, casting a golden shimmer on the waves that once swallowed his father. And in that moment, he could have sworn he saw the silhouette of an old man in a wheelchair at the edge of the pier. The siblings had thought they'd buried their past. But the ocean never keeps secrets. The morning after Michael's chilling sighting, the Adesina mansion in Ikoyi was tense and eerily quiet. The once vibrant house filled with laughter and power now felt like a tomb. Cynthia sat at the long glass dining table wearing a white silk robe, her face pale and her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. The ticking of the grandfather clock was the only sound breaking the silence. She looked up sharply when Michael walked in, still wearing his wrinkled shirt from the night before. His hair was disheveled, and his hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a glass of water. You look like you've seen a ghost, Cynthia said softly, trying to force a smile. Michael didn't respond at first. He gulped down the water, then turned toward her. I did. Cynthia's smile faded. What do you mean? I went to inspect one of the docks near Elagushi last night, he said, his voice low and shaky. I just wanted to make sure no trace of the accident remained. He paused. And then, I saw him. Cynthia frowned. You're just imagining things. We've both been stressed. Father's gone. There's no way. Michael slammed the glass on the table. Don't tell me what I saw, Cynthia. He was there, sitting in his wheelchair, looking right at me. The same old white agbada he wore that night. Her eyes widened. That's impossible. Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. He looked wet, like he just came out of the ocean. Cynthia's breath caught. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain starting outside made the silence even heavier. Maybe someone's playing a prank, she said finally. A journalist, a rival, someone who wants to scare us. Michael shook his head. No, it was him. I know it. They sat in silence, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Cynthia straightened her posture and forced herself to sound calm. We can't afford to lose control, Michael. We've just signed the contract with the foreign investors. If anyone senses weakness, everything we've built will crumble. We have to act normal. Michael stared at her, his eyes full of unease. Normal? After killing our father? Cynthia's voice hardened. Don't say that word again. He's dead and it's over. Whatever you saw, it wasn't real. But deep down, even Cynthia wasn't sure anymore. That night, she dreamed of water. Cold, endless water. She was drowning, and a familiar voice whispered her name from beneath the waves. Cynthia, why did you do it? She woke up gasping, her sheets drenched in sweat. For a moment, she could still hear the ocean waves, though she was miles from the shore. Later that morning, she went to the company headquarters on Victoria Island. The office was busy, with employees hurrying about, unaware of the dark secret their new leaders carried. Cynthia walked through the glass doors, forcing a confident smile. Good morning, ma'am, said the receptionist. Morning, Cynthia replied, her tone firm but distracted. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. As the elevator ascended, it suddenly jolted and stopped between floors. The lights flickered and a strange static filled the air. Cynthia's heart raced. Hello, she called, pressing the emergency button. No response. Then, faintly, she heard it, a man's voice echoing through the speakers. Cynthia. Her eyes widened. Who's there? The voice came again, closer, clearer. Why did you push me? She screamed and slammed the buttons repeatedly. The elevator shuddered before restarting and finally opened on her floor. Cynthia stumbled out, breathing hard. Her secretary rushed toward her. Madam, are you okay? I'm fine, she lied, brushing past. But her mind was spinning. The voice, it sounded exactly like her father's. That evening, Michael received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, Do you believe the ocean forgets? He opened it and his blood ran cold. Attached was a video file labeled ocean_clip.mp4. He clicked play. The shaky footage showed the shoreline at night. The waves rolled in slowly. Then out of the darkness, a figure appeared, an old man in a wheelchair, drenched from head to toe, his face half hidden by shadows. Michael's breath caught. The man raised his head slowly and in a low, gurgling voice said, You cannot bury guilt, my son. Michael jumped from his chair, knocking his laptop off the desk. Cynthia, he shouted, running toward her room. She opened the door, startled. What now? Someone sent me a video. He's alive, Cynthia. He's alive. Cynthia grabbed the laptop and played the clip again, her hands shaking. Her face drained of color. No, no, this can't be real, she whispered. Michael's voice cracked. Then how do you explain this? Someone found him. Or he found us. Cynthia's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. We have to find out who sent this. Check the security footage, contact the IT department. I don't care what it takes. But as she spoke, the lights flickered again and the video on the screen glitched. The image of their father's face lingered for a few seconds longer. Then the words appeared on the screen in dripping letters. See you soon. That night, the storm returned, echoing the one from the night of their father's death. Thunder rolled across the sky as both siblings sat in silence in the mansion's living room, the sound of rain hammering the windows. Cynthia clutched a blanket around her shoulders. Michael, what if we didn't kill him? What if he survived somehow? Michael rubbed his temples, his eyes bloodshot. Then he's coming for us. They both turned as a loud thud echoed from upstairs. Cynthia's voice trembled. What was that? Michael grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly climbed the stairs. Each creak of the wooden steps felt like thunder in his ears. He reached the hallway and froze. The family portrait, the one of them standing beside their father, had been taken down. In its place was a single photograph nailed to the wall. It was the same cliff where they had pushed him. And across it, written in wet, red ink, were 3 chilling words. I remember everything. Michael's knife clattered to the floor. Cynthia's scream echoed through the house as lightning lit up the entire hallway, revealing muddy wheelchair tracks leading down the corridor. The rain didn't stop all night. It poured relentlessly over the Adesina mansion as thunder cracked and lightning lit up the estate like flashes of judgment. Inside, Cynthia and Michael sat on the living room floor, pale and trembling. The air felt heavy, like the very walls of the house were closing in. Cynthia wrapped her arms around herself. Michael, we have to leave this place. Something isn't right here. I can't stay in this house anymore. Michael rubbed his forehead. Leave? And go where? You think running will fix this? You think we can run from a ghost? Cynthia's voice rose in panic. Then what do we do? Pretend like this is normal? There are wheelchair tracks in our hallway, Michael. I saw them with my own eyes. Michael stood and began pacing the room. Someone is trying to mess with us. Maybe it's one of the old board members. Dad had enemies, people who wanted to take the company. Maybe they're using this ghost nonsense to scare us. But Cynthia's voice shook as she whispered, what if it's not them? What if it's really him? Michael turned sharply. Enough. He's dead. We made sure of that. The moment those words left his mouth, the chandelier above them flickered and went out. The entire mansion plunged into darkness. Cynthia screamed. Michael grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. Stay close, he said. They crept through the dark hallway, the sound of the rain muffled by the thick walls. The light from Michael's phone bounced off the framed portraits, casting ghostly reflections. Suddenly they heard it, the faint sound of wheels rolling across the marble floor. Creak, creak, creak. Cynthia froze, clutching her brother's arm. Michael, that sound, it's coming from the dining room. He raised the phone, its beam trembling. Slowly they turned the corner. There, in the middle of the dining room, was their father's wheelchair. Empty. But the wheels were still turning, slowly as if someone had just left it there. Cynthia gasped. No. No, no, no. Michael swallowed hard. It's just the wind. But before he could move closer, the phone flickered and went black. They were plunged into darkness again. Then came the whisper. Low, deep gurgling. Why, my children? Cynthia screamed and bolted for the door. Michael followed, shouting, Cynthia. Wait. They ran outside into the storm, barefoot, drenched, hearts racing. Cynthia stumbled onto the wet driveway, gasping for air. Michael, she cried. We have to go to the police. Michael shook his head violently. And tell them what? That we killed our father and his ghost is haunting us? They'll lock us up. She fell to her knees, crying. Then what do we do? Michael hesitated, his face tightening. We go back to the cliff. Tonight. We make sure he's really gone. Cynthia's eyes widened. You want to go back there? To that place? He nodded. Yes. If there's anything left, anything that ties us to this, it ends tonight. They arrived at the cliff around midnight. The rain had lessened, but the wind was sharp, howling through the palm trees. The waves below were calmer than before, lapping quietly against the rocks as if mocking them. Cynthia clutched her coat tightly around her. Michael, I don't like this. We shouldn't have come. Stop talking, Michael muttered, shining his flashlight around the area. Look for the wheelchair. Maybe it washed up somewhere. They searched for nearly 20 minutes, stepping carefully over the slippery rocks. Then Cynthia froze. Michael, over there. Half buried in the wet sand near the shoreline was the twisted frame of their father's wheelchair. Rusted. Broken. The ocean had chewed it up and spat it back out. Michael stepped closer. That's it. That's proof he's dead. There's no way he survived that fall. But as he crouched down to touch the metal, something glimmered beside it, a gold wristwatch. He picked it up slowly. It was engraved with a name, Chief R. Adesina. Michael's breath caught. He turned it over, and saw fresh fingerprints smeared across the glass. Cynthia, he whispered, backing away. These prints, they're fresh. Before she could respond, the wind picked up violently. The waves crashed higher, spraying cold water against their faces. Let's go, Cynthia shouted. But then, through the mist, a silhouette appeared on the rocks below. A man seated, still, watching them. Cynthia's voice cracked. Michael, look. He turned slowly and his flashlight beam caught it. The figure was sitting in a wheelchair. The same white agbada. The same posture. The light flickered, but just for a second, Michael saw his father's face, pale, wet, eyes wide open. Cynthia screamed and stumbled backward. No. It's not real. Michael dropped the flashlight and it rolled across the ground, illuminating the inscription on the rocks near the cliff edge. The sea gives back what it owes. They ran. Neither looked back. By morning the story spread like wildfire. Fishermen at Tarqua Bay swore they had seen an old man in a wheelchair floating near the shore at dawn. Others claimed they heard his name whispered in the wind, Robert Adesina. At the Adesina Group office, strange things began happening. Documents went missing. Emails were sent from Chief Robert's old account. Memos appeared signed in his name. One message sent to the entire board read simply, I am not dead. Michael slammed his hand against the desk in rage. This has gone too far. Someone is trying to destroy us. Cynthia, her face pale, whispered, or, maybe we already destroyed ourselves. Michael glared at her. Don't start that nonsense again. I'll find whoever's behind this. I'll find them and end this once and for all. But as he stormed out of the office, his secretary entered timidly. Sir, there's a visitor waiting for you downstairs. Who? She hesitated. He said you would know him. He asked me to tell you, your father never died. Michael froze, the color draining from his face. What did you just say? The secretary swallowed hard. He's waiting in the lobby, sir. In a wheelchair. Michael's blood ran cold. And while he stood frozen in shock, Cynthia's phone buzzed with a message. A video. It was footage from the lobby's CCTV camera. The man in the wheelchair sat calmly near the reception desk. Water dripped from his clothes, forming a puddle on the marble floor. He looked straight into the camera. And smiled. If you've been following the story up till now, what would you do if your dead father suddenly returned like this? Could you live with the guilt? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Also, tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing where our listeners are tuning in from around the world. Michael's heart pounded so hard he could hear it echoing in his ears. For a moment he couldn't move. The words, he's waiting in the lobby, in a wheelchair, rang in his mind like thunder. Cynthia's voice broke through his paralysis as she burst into his office. Michael, what's going on? Why did I just get that video? He pointed to the screen, his hand trembling. He's here, Cynthia. He's in the building. Cynthia gasped, covering her mouth. No, that's not possible. Michael grabbed her by the wrist. Come with me. We're ending this today. They stormed toward the elevator. Every employee they passed stared in confusion as the two heirs of the Adesina empire looked like they'd seen death itself. When the elevator doors opened to the ground floor, Cynthia hesitated. What if it's not him? What if it's someone pretending? Michael's jaw tightened. Then we find out who sent them. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet. The receptionist's seat was empty. The air felt heavy and cold. Michael's eyes darted around the room and then he saw it, just near the glass doors facing the street. A wheelchair. He took a cautious step forward, Cynthia clutching his arm. The figure in the chair was covered with a black shawl. Michael's flashlight beam shook as he raised it toward the man. Who are you? Michael demanded. No answer. Who sent you? Slowly the figure lifted his head. Cynthia screamed. Was their father. Chief Robert Adesina. His face was pale, his eyes hollow but alive. Water still dripped from his chin. The gold wristwatch gleamed on his wrist, the same one Michael had found by the ocean. "Father," Cynthia whispered. You're alive?" He didn't reply. He simply looked at them with disappointment so deep it made their stomachs churn. Then, in a slow, rasping voice, he said, "You thought the sea could keep me?" Michael stepped back, shaking his head. No, this isn't real." Chief Robert's eyes glistened as he wheeled himself closer. "You buried me before I was dead. You took my breath, my name, my company. But you forgot one thing." Michael's voice trembled. "Which what?" Chief Robert smiled faintly. "The truth always floats back to the surface." Before they could move, security guards rushed in, their radios buzzing. "Sir, we saw someone matching your father's description enter, but..." They stopped mid-sentence. The wheelchair was empty. Michael and Cynthia turned. Chief Robert had vanished. No footprints, no trail of water. Only his wristwatch remained on the marble floor, ticking loudly in the silence. That night, Cynthia sat in her room shaking. She couldn't eat. She couldn't think. The house felt haunted by their father's presence. She stared at the mirror, whispering to herself, "He's dead. He's dead. He's dead." Then, from behind her reflection, she saw movement. She turned quickly. Nothing. When she looked back at the mirror again, her heart nearly stopped. There, standing behind her reflection, was Chief Robert, staring into the mirror, his eyes hollow and wet. "Cynthia?" His voice echoed faintly. She screamed and fell off her chair. When she looked up again, the image was gone, but the mirror was cracked and a single drop of water slid down its surface. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Father, please forgive me." The next morning, Michael barged into her room, wild-eyed and unshaven. "We're being watched," he said. "Someone planted cameras in the house. I found one hidden behind the bookshelf." Cynthia gasped. "What? By who?" "I don't know. But whoever it is, they know everything." He threw a small black camera on the bed. "I found it still recording." Cynthia picked it up with trembling hands. "Michael, this isn't just blackmail. It's revenge." Before they could speak further, Michael's phone buzzed. It was a video call. The number was unknown. "Don't answer it," Cynthia whispered. Michael's jaw clenched. He pressed accept. The screen flickered, and there he was again. Chief Robert, sitting in the same wheelchair, this time in what looked like a hospital room. Machines beeped faintly behind him. "My children," he said softly. "You wanted the empire so badly. Now watch what greed has built for you." Michael's hands shook. How are you alive?" Chief Robert smiled. "You pushed me, but the ocean gave me back. The fishermen at Tarqua Bay pulled me out. Broken. Half dead. But alive." Cynthia sobbed. "We thought you were gone, Father. We panicked, He interrupted sharply. "You planned. You executed. You watched me fall. You let the world believe lies." Michael stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "Please, Father, we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix," Chief Robert said coldly. "You both already sealed your fate." Then the call ended. Cynthia fell to her knees, crying. Michael paced like a madman. "We need to find him. We can't let him destroy us." Cynthia looked up, terrified. "He doesn't need to destroy us, Michael. We already did that ourselves." That night, journalists flooded social media with breaking news. Billionaire Chief Robert Adesina found alive after being presumed dead. Adesina heirs face investigation over attempted murder. Videos of Chief Robert sitting in a hospital room went viral across Nigeria. His voice trembled but was full of strength as he said, "I was betrayed by the ones I loved the most. Let justice speak for me now." Michael threw his phone against the wall in rage. "He's turning the whole world against us." Cynthia stared blankly at the TV, her face pale. "He's not just alive, Michael. He's back to finish what he started." That night, they packed their bags to flee the country. Cynthia whispered, "We can go to South Africa, stay hidden until this blows over." Michael nodded silently. But as they loaded their suitcases into the car, the house lights flickered again. Cynthia turned slowly toward the front door. It was wide open. Rain blew in from outside, soaking the marble floor. And there, sitting in the doorway in his wheelchair, was their father. His eyes were calm. His voice was steady. "You can run from the world," he said softly, "but you can't run from the blood that made you." Cynthia collapsed, sobbing. Michael froze, speechless. Chief Robert tilted his head slightly. "Do you remember what you said before you pushed me?" Neither answered. He nodded slowly. "I do." Then, with the faintest smile, he said, Now it's your turn to feel what the ocean feels. The wind roared through the house, slamming the doors shut. Every light in the mansion burst at once. When the neighbors rushed in after hearing the screams, the mansion was empty. Only 2 sets of wet footprints led toward the cliff behind the house. The sun rose quietly over the Lagos lagoon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gray. But for miles around the Adesina mansion, an eerie silence lingered, a silence heavy with dread. The security guards who had heard the screams the night before stood outside the gates, too afraid to enter. Inspector Colonel Adesina arrived in an unmarked black SUV, his trench coat flapping as he stepped out. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with sharp eyes and the calm authority of someone used to chaos. "Where are the heirs?" he asked. One guard stammered, We don't know, sir. We heard shouting and glass breaking, but when we came in, nobody was there." Inspector Colonel frowned. "Nobody?" "No, sir. Just this." He handed over a phone, still wet from rain. The screen flickered before playing a short video recorded at 1:43 a.m. In the video, Michael stood in the living room, his face twisted in terror. "He's here again. I swear, Cynthia, he's..." Then a sudden flash of lightning, and the video cut off with Cynthia's scream echoing into darkness. Colonel pocketed the phone, his expression hard. "Search every inch of the house. And get divers near the cliff." Hours later, police officers combed through the massive property. Broken glass lay scattered across the marble floors. Chairs were overturned. A trail of water led from the front door all the way to the back terrace overlooking the cliff. One officer called out, "Sir, you need to see this." Inspector Colonel walked over. The officer pointed to a faint line carved into the wet concrete of the terrace. 3 words written with something sharp. "Justice from the sea." Colonel knelt, tracing the letters with his glove. He turned to the forensics team. "Check for fingerprints." But before anyone could respond, one of the divers shouted from below, "Inspector, you better come see this." Colonel rushed to the edge. 2 divers were pulling something from the shallow water near the rocks. A body bag. No, 2. As they opened them, the officers stepped back in shock. Inside the first was Michael Adesina, face pale, eyes wide open in terror. Inside the second lay Cynthia, her hands clenched, her mouth frozen mid-scream. The inspector exhaled slowly, removing his cap. "Cause of death." One of the medics murmured, "No visible wounds, sir. No struggle marks. It's almost like they just drowned." Colonel frowned. "But they weren't in the ocean long enough for that." The medic hesitated. "Sir, there's something else." Both their watches stopped at exactly 2 a.m., the same minute the storm ended. By noon, the story exploded across the nation. The Adesina twins found dead, a curse from the sea? Haunting or justice? Mystery deepens as billionaires' children found drowned. Social media buzzed with theories. Some said it was divine retribution. Others claimed the ghost of Chief Robert had dragged them into the ocean. A few even believed the old man had faked his own death just to expose his greedy children. But no one could deny one thing: the empire of the Adesinas was now in ruins. 3 days later, Inspector Colonel visited St. George's Hospital in Ikoyi, where Chief Robert was reportedly recovering. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and silence. Nurses whispered as the inspector passed. He found Chief Robert sitting by the window in his wheelchair, staring out at the gray sky. His once strong face looked fragile now, but his eyes were alert and steady. "Chief," Colonel greeted, bowing slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Chief Robert's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "Loss, Inspector? I lost them the night greed took over their souls." Colonel nodded respectfully. "Still, they were your children." Chief Robert's voice hardened. "Children who turned into vultures. They didn't just want my wealth, they wanted me gone." He turned his gaze back to the window. "But I forgive them. The sea does not." Colonel shifted uncomfortably. "Chief, if I may ask, how did you survive that night?" The old man took a deep breath. "When they pushed me, the waves caught me. I don't remember much, only that I woke up on a fisherman's boat." He said he found me tangled in seaweed, barely breathing. He paused. I stayed silent. I wanted to see what they'd become without me. And I saw everything. "Through who?" Colonel asked. Chief Robert smiled faintly. "Let's just say the ocean has eyes everywhere." Colonel frowned, not understanding. "And on the night they died, were you here?" Chief Robert turned slowly to look at him. "Inspector, I haven't left this hospital in weeks." A chill ran down Colonel's spine. "Then how do you explain this?" The old man's lips trembled slightly, but his eyes stayed calm. Some debts are not paid by human hands. Later that evening, Connell walked to his car in the hospital parking lot. The rain had started again, light but persistent. As he reached for the door, he froze. On the windshield was a single object, a gold wristwatch. He picked it up carefully. It was engraved, Cynthia Adesina. But the second hand was moving. Tick, tick, tick. The inspector looked back at the hospital window where Chief Robert had been. The chair was empty. That night, the ocean roared louder than ever. Fishermen near Tarqua Bay swore they saw 3 figures by the rocks, 2 standing, 1 seated in a wheelchair. They didn't move. They just stared out at the sea. One fisherman said he heard a voice carried by the wind. Blood for blood. Debt for debt. And then, as dawn broke, the figures vanished. Weeks later, Adesina Group was sold off. The family mansion was abandoned, swallowed by vines and silence. Locals called it the house that the sea cursed. Some nights, they said, if you stood near the cliffs, you could hear the sound of wheels rolling softly across the marble floor. And if you listened closely enough, a deep, broken voice would whisper through the waves. Justice is like the tide, it always returns. Far away in a quiet fishing village, a small boy ran along the beach. He saw something shiny half buried in the sand. He dug it out, a gold wristwatch. It still ticked. He looked toward the horizon where the sea met the sky. For a brief moment, he thought he saw an old man in a wheelchair watching him from afar, before fading into mist. The boy dropped the watch and ran home. Behind him, the tide rolled in and swallowed it whole. The waves whispered secrets that morning, secrets the world was never meant to hear. For weeks, Lagos couldn't stop talking about the mysterious deaths of Michael and Cynthia Adesina. Everyone had an opinion. Some called it karma. Others whispered of ancestral curses. But no one could explain the strange details. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, and no explanation for how both siblings ended up drowned on dry land. At the Lagos State Police headquarters, Inspector Connell sat behind his cluttered desk, staring at the reports. No fingerprints, no footprints, no intruder. 2 young heirs dead in their mansion after a supposed haunting, he muttered to himself. What kind of case is this? His partner, Sergeant Bode, entered with a newspaper tucked under his arm. Oga, the whole city day talk say Chief Adesina's ghost killed them. Connell frowned. Ghost? You know I don't believe in that nonsense. Bode chuckled nervously. Sir, sometimes even the things we don't believe happen for this country. Before Connell could reply, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Inspector Connell speaking. A soft voice replied, Inspector, if you want the truth, meet me at Tarqua Bay tonight. Alone. The line went dead. Connell froze. Bode traced that call. Bode tried quickly but shook his head. Number no day registered for any network, sir. Connell leaned back, exhaling. Whoever it was, they know something. That night, the inspector drove toward Tarqua Bay. The air was thick and humid, the road deserted. When he arrived, the beach was quiet except for the soft hiss of waves breaking against the shore. The moon hung low, reflecting on the dark water. Then he saw him. A young fisherman stood near the rocks, barefoot, holding a lantern. His clothes were damp, his eyes wary. You came, he said softly. Connell approached. You made the call? The man nodded. Yes. My name is Tund. I was the one who found Chief Adesina the night he was thrown into the sea. Connell's eyes narrowed. You saved him. Tund nodded again. I thought he was dead when I saw him floating, but he opened his eyes. He told me not to tell anyone he was alive. Said his children would come looking for him, and they must never find him first. Why didn't you go to the police? Connell asked. Tund looked away, his voice trembling. He gave me money. Said when the time was right, the truth would reveal itself. But Inspector, he paused, looking toward the water. After he recovered, he came back here many nights. He would sit by the shore, staring into the sea. Sometimes he talked to it, like it was alive, like it answered him. Connell frowned. Talk to the sea? Yes, Tund whispered. He said the sea listens to justice when humans fail. A cold wind blew through, making the lantern flicker. Tund looked down at the sand, his eyes haunted. The night before the twins died, he came again. He prayed. He cried. And he said something I will never forget. Let the ocean judge them the way it judged me. The waves roared suddenly, louder than before. Connell turned toward the sound. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure sitting in a wheelchair at the edge of the surf. But when he blinked, it was gone. The next morning, Connell went straight to St. George's Hospital. He walked briskly into Chief Robert's room, but the bed was empty. Sheets folded. No patient. He stormed to the nurse's station. "Where is Chief Adesina?" The nurse looked confused. "Sir, the chief was discharged 2 days ago. His daughter came to get him." Connell's brows furrowed. "Daughter? Both his children are dead." The nurse frowned. "No, sir. This one said her name was Zara Adesina. She showed his photo, said she was his first child from another marriage." "Where did they go?" The nurse checked the records. "A private home in Ape." Connell's gut tightened. "Give me the address." 2 hours later he arrived at the Ape residence, a quiet seaside house surrounded by palm trees and the sound of waves. The gates were slightly open. The air smelled of salt and something faintly metallic. He stepped inside cautiously, hand on his gun. The house was empty, but the faint hum of electricity buzzed somewhere deeper inside. "Chief Robert?" Connell called out. No answer. He followed the sound to a large study filled with books and photographs. In the center of the room stood the same wheelchair he'd seen at the hospital, but empty. Then he noticed something on the desk. A family photo. Chief Robert standing with a woman and a little girl. The inscription on the frame read, "To my true heir, Zara." Connell frowned. So there was another child. He turned toward the sound of footsteps. A young woman stood in the doorway. She couldn't have been older than 25. Dark-skinned, elegant, wearing a simple blue dress. Her resemblance to Chief Robert was unmistakable. "You must be Inspector Connell," she said calmly. "I was expecting you." Connell studied her carefully. "You're Zara Adesina?" "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "My father sent for me before he died. He wanted me to take over everything he built. And to correct what my siblings destroyed." Connell's voice hardened. "Your siblings are dead. Do you know anything about that?" Zara looked him straight in the eye. "I know they took what wasn't theirs. And I know the sea doesn't forgive." Connell frowned. "That's not an answer." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes the truth isn't meant for courts or police reports, Inspector. Sometimes it belongs to the tide." He took a step forward. "Where is your father now?" Her eyes darkened. "He's where he belongs. With the water." Connell's heart pounded. "Are you saying he's dead?" Zara turned toward the open window overlooking the ocean. The sea took him back. "He said his work was done." Connell followed her gaze. The waves were calm, almost unnaturally still. Zara turned back to him, her voice softer now. "He left everything to me. The company. The estate. But not the guilt. That stays with the sea." Connell took a deep breath. "Miss Adesina, I need you to come with me to the station for questioning." She smiled again, serene and unbothered. "Of course, Inspector. But tell me something." "What?" "If justice finally finds peace, should we still call it punishment?" He didn't answer. As they left the house, Connell glanced back one last time. The waves rolled lazily against the shore. For a split second he saw something glinting near the rocks. A wheelchair. Empty. Slowly sinking beneath the water. That night the news broke again. Secret daughter of Chief Adesina emerges, to inherit the empire. Inspector questions new heir as mystery of family curse deepens. On social media, some called Zara the child of justice. Others whispered she was something else entirely, something not quite human. Because one fisherman swore he saw her later that night, standing ankle-deep in the ocean, her dress billowing in the wind, talking to the waves. And the sea once again whispered back. The wind over Ape carried a strange heaviness that morning, a quiet that seemed to hum with unanswered questions. Inspector Connell sat in his car outside Zara Adesina's seaside home, staring out at the waves. Something about her calm, measured words the night before haunted him. If justice finally finds peace, should we still call it punishment? He replayed it over and over in his head. There was something about her tone, detached, almost otherworldly. She hadn't flinched at the mention of her siblings' deaths, or even her father's. It was as though she knew something the rest of them didn't. Connell rubbed his temples and stepped out of the car. "I'm not leaving here until I find out the truth," he muttered. Inside the house, Zara stood before an altar, simple but strange. A large seashell sat in the center, surrounded by candles and a framed photo of Chief Robert smiling in his younger days. She touched the shell gently, whispering in Yoruba, "Ikuele Babami." The tide has settled. Her maid, Mama Nkechi, entered quietly. "Madam, the inspector is back again. He says he must speak with you." Zara turned slowly. "Let him wait." "But madam, he has been sitting outside since morning." I said, Zara interrupted softly but firmly. Let him wait. The sea doesn't rush for anyone. Outside, Connell tapped his pen against his notepad, growing impatient. He noticed something odd: the waves. They didn't crash like they normally did on this part of the coast. They moved in slow, steady rhythm, as if following a pattern, or listening. Finally the door opened. Zara stepped out, wearing a long white gown that fluttered in the sea breeze. Her hair was tied back neatly, her expression unreadable. "Inspector," she greeted calmly. "You came back. Do you always chase the wind?" Connell straightened. "I'm chasing the truth, Miss Adesina. You said your father's work was done. What did you mean by that?" She tilted her head slightly. "My father believed justice doesn't need witnesses, it only needs balance. When you break that balance, nature corrects it." Connell frowned. "You're speaking in riddles. Are you saying he planned his children's deaths?" Zara's lips curved into a faint smile. "He didn't have to. The sea already knew what they had done." Connell took a step closer. "You talk about the sea as if it's alive." Her voice softened. "To some of us, it is." He studied her closely. "Where were you the night Michael and Cynthia died?" Zara looked out toward the waves. "Right here. Listening." "Listening to what?" "To their cries," she whispered. "They called out for help that never came." Connell's brow furrowed. "You expect me to believe that the ocean killed them out of vengeance?" Zara met his eyes calmly. "Do you believe it didn't?" The air between them grew thick. The inspector exhaled slowly. "You're hiding something, Miss Adesina. Whether it's about your father or the company, I will find out." She smiled faintly. "Be careful what you find, Inspector. The truth doesn't always want to be uncovered." Later that evening, Connell returned to his car and called his partner. "Bode, I need background on this girl, Zara Adesina. Birth records, school history, anything." "Copy that, sir. Give me a few hours." When the call ended, Connell glanced toward the house one last time. Through the window, he saw Zara kneeling before the altar again. The candle flames flickered violently, though there was no wind inside. He blinked. For a brief moment, it looked like another figure was standing behind her, an old man in a white agbada, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. When Connell blinked again, the figure was gone. By midnight, Bode called back. His voice was uneasy. "Oga, I think you need to see this for yourself." "Talk to me, Bode." "Sir, there's no birth record of any Zara Adesina in Nigeria. Not in Lagos, Abuja, or even abroad. Her name doesn't appear in any national database." Connell froze. "What do you mean?" "She's real, I spoke to her." "That's not all," Bode continued. "The hospital where the chief was supposedly discharged from, they have no record of him ever being admitted there after his recovery." Connell's blood ran cold. "But I saw him in that hospital myself." Bode hesitated. "Sir, I checked the footage from that night. There's no entry for you visiting any patient under that name. The ward was empty." The line went silent for a few seconds. Connell could only hear the sound of the ocean in the background. Then he said quietly, "Bode, meet me at the ape house. Right now." When he arrived back at the property, the wind had picked up again. The sea raged louder than before, crashing hard against the rocks. The house lights were out. Only the moonlight illuminated the path. Connell pushed the door open cautiously. "Zara?" he called out. No answer. He stepped inside, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. The altar was still there, but the photo of Chief Robert was missing. The seashell in the center now glowed faintly, like it held light from within. A whisper brushed his ear. "Inspector." He spun around. "Who's there?" No one. Only the sound of the sea beyond the open window. Then he noticed wet footprints leading from the altar toward the back of the house. Slowly he followed them. They led outside, across the sand toward the water. Standing by the shoreline was Zara, her white gown billowing, her bare feet in the surf. "Zara," he shouted. "You're coming with me." She didn't turn. "Why fight what's already over, Inspector? What are you talking about?" She faced him now. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears but with reflection. "You can't arrest the tide. You can't stop what's meant to wash away." "Where is your father?" Connell demanded. Zara smiled sadly. "With me." And as the next wave rose, it glowed faintly blue. For a moment, Connell saw shapes moving within it, faces, outlines of people, Michael, Cynthia, and Chief Robert among them, watching silently. Then the wave crashed over Zara, swallowing her whole. Connell ran forward, shouting her name, but when the water receded, the beach was empty. Only the seashell from the altar lay in the sand, still glowing faintly. Hours later, police arrived, but there was no trace of Zara or any footprints. Only Connell's. When Bode asked what had happened, the inspector could only whisper, "The sea took her back." Bode frowned. "Who took who, sir?" Connell stared blankly at the horizon. "All of them." The next morning, locals found the shell that had been on the beach. When they pressed it to their ears, they didn't hear the usual whoosh of the ocean. They heard a voice. A deep, calm voice that said, "Greed drowns the heart before the body." No one ever went near the ape house again. The sea was calm again. Too calm. Days passed since the disappearance of Zara Adesina, but her story rippled across Lagos like a storm that refused to die. Newspapers called it the curse of the Adesinas. Radio hosts debated endlessly. Some called it divine justice, others said it was madness. Yet, no one could deny what the ocean had taken, and what it had given back. Inspector Connell had been placed on a short leave after his report on the incident at Ape. His superiors didn't believe his story about the glowing waves or the faces beneath the tide. They said exhaustion had warped his mind. But Connell knew what he saw. He'd seen truth take form, and then vanish into water. Now, sitting by the beach alone, he stared at the rolling waves. He hadn't been sleeping. The sound of the sea haunted him, whispering faint words in the night. Sometimes, he swore he heard Zara's voice calling softly, almost kindly, "Inspector?" He took a deep breath. "What do you want from me?" he murmured into the wind. "You've taken enough." But the sea didn't answer. Not with words, at least. That evening, a knock came on Connell's apartment door. He opened it to find an elderly fisherman standing there. His clothes were damp, his eyes weary but sharp. "You are Inspector Connell, yes?" the man asked. Connell nodded cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Paolani," the man said. "I knew Chief Robert. I knew his story before it became a curse." Connell frowned. "You knew him personally?" The old man nodded. "Yes. We were childhood friends. We both came from the same village in Badagry. But long ago, before he became a rich man, something happened that changed him forever." "Go on," Connell urged. Paolani sighed. "He wronged a woman. Not just any woman, a priestess of Alakan, the goddess of the sea. He promised her land to build a fishing port, then cheated her and took everything for his own business. The woman cursed him, 'You shall gain all the riches of the ocean, but one day the sea will reclaim everything you love.'" Connell's eyes widened. "So you're saying this started long before his children turned against him?" The old man nodded gravely. "The curse doesn't strike quickly. It waits until greed ripens." He looked out toward the horizon. When his children betrayed him, the balance was broken. The sea didn't just punish them, it fulfilled what was promised. Connell exhaled slowly. "And Zara?" Paolani gave a faint smile. "Zara was never his daughter in flesh. She was the sea's daughter, the priestess reborn. Sent to finish what her mother started." Connell's heart pounded. "You mean she wasn't human?" The old man looked at him with pity. "Tell me, Inspector, does it matter? Justice comes in many forms." He turned to leave, his voice barely audible as he walked into the mist. "The sea remembers. Always." That night, Connell couldn't sleep. Every creak of the wind sounded like whispers. Finally he rose, grabbed his car keys and drove to the Ape Coast one last time. The house was still abandoned. The gate rusted. The sea stretched endlessly before him. The moonlight painted the water silver, calm and cruel. Connell walked toward the shore until the waves licked his shoes. "Zara," he called softly, "if you're still here, if any of you are still here, show me something." "Anything." "Nothing." He turned to leave. Then he heard it. The sound of a wheelchair rolling slowly across the sand behind him. Connell froze. Slowly he turned around. There, just beyond the surf, was Chief Robert Adesina sitting in his wheelchair, the water up to his chest. His eyes were calm now, his face peaceful. "Chief," Connell whispered. "Why come back?" The old man's lips curved into a faint smile. "To remind men like you that justice isn't yours to control." Connell's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" Chief Robert gestured toward the horizon. "You saw what greed did to my bloodline. Remember it, Inspector. The sea watches everyone. Even you." The waves began to rise again, swirling around the wheelchair. Connell stepped forward. "Wait. What should I tell them? The world doesn't believe me." Chief Robert's voice echoed over the wind. "Tell them the ocean never forgets." And with that, the water rose higher, swallowing him whole. The wheelchair tipped, disappeared, and the sea went silent once more. Connell stood there, staring at the endless horizon, tears mixing with the salt spray. He knew then that this was the end, and the beginning of a legend. Weeks later, Cunnell resigned from the force. He moved to a quiet coastal village, where he lived humbly among fishermen. Sometimes, when storms gathered at night, the villagers saw him sitting by the beach, writing in an old notebook. When asked why, he would only say, "I'm documenting what the sea remembers." One evening, as thunder rolled across the horizon, he placed the final page into his notebook. On it were these words: "Chief Robert Adesina built his empire from the sea, and the sea reclaimed it. His children took his life for greed, and the sea took theirs for balance. Zara came as the sea's hand, both daughter and judgment. Justice isn't always served in courtrooms. Sometimes, it rises with the tide." He closed the book and looked out at the waves one last time. Somewhere in the distance, under the glow of lightning, he thought he saw 3 figures standing side by side at the water's edge: Robert, Michael, and Cynthia, watching silently. And in front of them, a young woman in a white gown, her eyes shining like the ocean itself. She smiled faintly, then vanished with the wind. The sea roared once more as though sealing its final promise. The ocean gives back what it owes. If you were in Inspector Cunnell's shoes, would you believe the sea truly brought justice? Or was it just guilt and fate catching up? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this story, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from, because every voice adds to the tide of our stories.